Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. How is everybody doing tonight? MashaAllah, thank you so much for coming to the Khalil Center banquet. This is a wonderful show of support. We're very happy for you to be here. And I'm very honored to be here from California, alhamdulillah. And our California branch of Khalil Center is having their banquet in a few weeks. So I hope and pray, inshallah, that the support is just as wonderful as Chicago's support, inshallah. Inshallah, I'm going to take a few minutes and share with you a little bit about my thoughts on why I think Khalil Center is just an amazing and wonderful project. I too, like the folks who spoke before me, remember when Brother Huban approached me some years ago and suggested to maybe branch out and open Khalil Center in California. And at the time I thought, that might be a really interesting idea. I just don't know if our community would really take to it and if they would really want to actually have this be a service that's offered and would they use it. Considering that sometimes it's not very known whether somebody would go to therapy and seek care and treatment when needed. Also, because of my training and background working with predominantly the Muslim community as a psychiatrist, I find that there's often this stigma or barrier of actually seeking care. However, mashallah, I also know that this is not something that's foreign to our tradition as much as people in our general community tend to think it is. And here's the proof of that. Let me share with you a little bit of my own journey and what it is and how it is that I came to do what I'm doing today, mashallah. Because having been trained in Islamic sciences and having been somebody who actually teaches the deen, for those of you who know me from other realms of my work, as somebody who teaches at the Zaytuna College, right, as somebody who teaches deen subjects, wearing the psychiatrist hat at Stanford, different institution, different hat that I wear, or perhaps we could call it a different hijab on a different day, mashallah. At that point, there's always this tension back and forth. Does psychiatry really apply to our Muslim community? How important is it to have these mental health treatments? And so, my journey began with really trying to figure out where is the connection between the two things. And I see in your faces that you have some of these questions as well too. So let me ask you, here I'll give the first question and you let me know what you think. In America, percentage-wise, how many people in America consider themselves to be a religious person in 2017? Give me a number. 5%? 5. Others?
20.
7? 70. 70. Other numbers? 20%? Well, according to the Gallup poll, when they asked the question, do you believe in God? And later they changed the question to, because some people don't identify with God, capital G, they said, do you believe in a universal spirit? The answer was, for either question, 89% of Americans said that they do believe in God or a universal spirit. So 5 is pretty far, because we tend to think of America as being a secular country, an a-religious country, but in reality, it's actually a country of people who hold on to faith, right? And later, you might think, well, maybe these are people who believe in God but don't actually attend any religious services or go to the masjid or the church or the synagogue. But according to the Pew study, it actually turns out that approximately 2/3 of Americans are actually members of churches or synagogues or masajid. 2/3. To the point that we can even say that 40% of them attend regularly. And 9 out of 10 Americans say that they pray regularly, and 58% of them, almost half, over half, say they pray daily. Now put that into context. That sounds a lot like Muslims too, but this is the general American society. So when you think of it that way, and you start to say, well, if somebody has an issue and needs some counseling or support, who are they going to turn to first? Who? Who would you go to first? Your family, yes, and by and large, the Muslim community often says family. Next? Friends? Yes, friends would be very high on the list. And a religious leader. And that's exactly what one of my earliest studies over at Stanford showed. We have exactly that pie chart. If I had my chart up, I would show you that the largest percentage is family, followed by friends, followed by an imam or a sheikh. And a tiny little sliver for mental health professionals. However, a lot of that has to do with the fact that there aren't institutions, there aren't places like Khalil Center for people to seek out care. And especially for people who are God-centered the way we are, to seek out God-centered therapy or care. And this is why I think Khalil Center's work is incredibly important. Just recently I was speaking to the Northern California Psychiatric Society, basically the San Francisco's branch of the APA, the American Psychiatric Association. And I gave them these same stats that I gave to you, and they were shocked. Because even as, general American population, people don't know this even about the general American population themselves, right? To realize how God-centered this is. But interestingly enough, the talk they asked me to give them was on faith and mental health. So there is a recognition that this is important, tying the two things together, and it's not just amongst the Muslims. But we are newcomers to this discussion, even though we shouldn't be. For example, I have training from Duke, one of my mentors named Dr. Harold Koenig, one of the first people who write a lot on faith and mental health and spirituality. He has all these studies that show that people who are religiously devout and actually practice their religion and go back to the religion for support tend to have healthier physical and mental health lives, with the exception of extremists, is what his study showed. MashaAllah. So as we kind of talk about these studies and really talk about the actual empirical data that comes behind it, and I'm speaking to you as an academician, somebody who's at a university academic setting doing research, right? I direct a lab called the Muslims and Mental Health Lab at Stanford. And the studies that come out of there systematically show time and time again the importance of actually having faith integrated in with the discussion on mental health. But how could you do this unless you actually know what it is you're going to offer? What does our deen offer? We have a hadith that we all know. We have ayat that we all know, right? But in addition to that, what else? Well, we don't have to look very far. Let's look at our own tradition, for example. One of the lines of research within my lab that I'm really very excited about is a historical line that looks at the history of mental illness from the golden era, from the 6th century all the way to the 12th, 13th centuries of Islam. And the beautiful thing about the manuscripts of our noble predecessors is that they would start from the head and end at the toe. And so we would just kind of focus right here, and we'd have our answers on how our noble predecessors understood mental illness and how they treated it and looked at it. And subhanAllah, amazing, amazing results. I'll give you the example of one paper which we recently wrote on Imam al-Balkhi, for those who are familiar with him, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, who has a book translated now as The Sustenance of the Body and the Soul. Before it was translated and we were kind of reviewing manuscripts, we came upon this little tiny manuscript, but what's in it were gems. And I mean chapter after chapter, speaking about what today we recognize as mental illnesses, as modern day psychiatrists and psychologists, and treat them. Yet he is writing in the 9th century. The 9th century. So I went to one of my mentors, and take a moment here and spell out this name in your head, because no joke, this man's name was Dr. K-O-R-A-N. Dr. Quran, who is actually not a Muslim, is a forefather of OCD in this country. And Stanford had one of the first OCD labs in the entire nation. And what is OCD? Obsessive compulsive disorder. So he's one of the big wigs, right, in this field, and someone who's written extensively on this and has all the background in this. And so I approached him one day and I said, Dr. Quran, I think I actually found, it's amazing that his name's Dr. Quran. I found this book that I think actually talks about OCD from the 9th century. And he said, impossible. It can't be. I've researched everything there is to research. I know all the background. I've written about this, the Greeks and the Romans and the so on. There can't be anything as extensive as you're saying. I said to him, it's in Arabic. He said, okay, fine, translate it. Translate it and let's see what happens. And so we did. And I'm talking not a little case report or a case study or a little paragraph here or there. I'm talking about an entire an entire chapter with classification, for those who are familiar with medicine, classification, diagnosis, and treatment. And to prove it even more, we translated all the criteria Imam al-Balkhi had for this disorder that today we would call OCD, and brought out the modern day psychiatric manual called the DSM, the most current version of it, the DSM-5, published in 2013. and put them side by side, all of the criteria that today you would diagnose OCD with. Imam al-Balkhi got them every single point by point by point by point. He was floored. He said, you have to submit this for publication immediately. And so we did. And the reviewers took a while to review, and for those who are familiar with medical journals and the difficulty in publishing in them, or double-blinded, peer-reviewed journals, right? They took a long time, and I said, Akid, for sure they're not going to let this get published. Because it really does overturn everything we know about psychiatric history and medical history. But however, to their credit, they came back 2 months later and said, we took so long because we needed to find historians of medicine to make sure that what you were saying was accurate, because they were just dumbfounded by this article. And so the historians wrote back in their commentary and said, this has single-handedly overturned what we understood about psychiatric history. SubhanAllah. One article, then became two, and there's more that we're writing, but one effort, and the effort of really trying to figure out what do our noble predecessors say. Now, Imam al-Balkhi is in the 9th century, and the people that they attribute OCD to in the books of history, Western history, are in the 19th century. So it's not like they were off by a couple hundred years. They were off by 1,000 years, a millennium. And even those references are not as complete as Imam al-Balkhi. So when I see these things, and we read about these things, and we actually write about these things, we realize, yes, subhanAllah, this kind of work is so important. Because it means that it bridges our history and our heritage. We're so proud of the Islamic golden era, are you not? But to know and really understand the greatness of our predecessors in relation to they didn't ignore everything. Anything at all was never ignored, right? There were no taboos or stigma, because if they were, they wouldn't have been this advanced. And further proof of that is the very first, and I don't know if you know this, but the very first psychiatric wards in a hospital system was in the Muslim world, 9th century Baghdad. And the first standalone psychiatric institutions were also in the Muslim world. And they had what today we pride ourselves in medicine, we call it the interdisciplinary team, which is what? The doctor, the nurse, the pharmacist, who else? The dietitian, the person who is what we would call the religious or spiritual leader. These people, and one more person, today we would call this person a social worker, right? Who would help figure out where the person transitions to after they left the hospital. Social work, right? This combination of an interdisciplinary team was something we pride ourselves on. That there were daily visits by doctors, that religious leaders came and saw those who were ill. And not only that, but these institutions were beautiful. They were in some dungeon or a little jail cell. And certainly they weren't being burned as witches at the stake the way it was happening, because what was happening at the same time as the golden era of Islam? What was happening in Europe? The Dark Ages, exactly. People were being burned at the stake. So you start to understand the enlightenment of those who Islam affected, right? You start to understand what it is that they were able to accomplish once they understood the ahadith and the ayat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about, taking care and treating those who are ill, right? SubhanAllah. And then you start to understand a little bit more as to why we need to revive this work and make sure this is back to where it used to be and go forward even further. We're talking about a disconnect of centuries and centuries. But the work of Khalil Center, inshallah, will bridge this gap and kind of bring these things back to the forefront. That we understand our own heritage and legacy, and that we really devote ourselves to really bringing this together and making sure that we really have the types of treatment of integrated spiritual care the way non-Muslim authors talk about. But now we do this for ourselves, using our own tradition and background, subhanAllah. And so here I want to say, the idea of deen, for those of you who are wondering, and still kind of a little curious as to why we should have these psychiatric or psychological therapy institutes that have a deen component to them, remember that in the Muslim world, in the golden era, these kind of institutions were funded fully by zakat funds, mashallah. And I want to say that that's so forward-thinking, right? To think ahead and to really know that that's an important thing, that you shouldn't let anybody who is ill or suffering be left behind or unattended to. So inshallah, we move in that direction with your support, inshallah. I'd love to see the Bemeristan kind of model back to where it is. Imagine if we had that right here in the heart of Chicago, or right in San Francisco, or in other cities around the country. If any organization is likely to do this, it is the Khalil Center, inshallah, and that's what we pray for. And lastly, I want to leave you, and I don't want to take too much time here, but I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. When we opened up the branch of Khalil Center in California about a year and a half ago, like I mentioned, it wasn't clear to me whether or not we'd actually be able to pull this off. I didn't know if people would come. I knew that Khalil Center existed here for many years, but I wasn't sure about California. Sisters and brothers, within that very first year, within the first few months, we started off with a little office, two offices next to each other, and not really sure what was going to happen. And in the next few months, I found myself hiring another therapist, and then another therapist, and then another therapist, and they started to just kind of give birth to this whole entire therapy clinic with different therapists that have different niche focuses. And also, now we've opened a second center in California and building out, inshallah, a third center ready to open up by the fall. Late summer or the fall, inshallah. That is a testament to the need within our community. That is a testament to the kind of work that Khalil Center does, the quality of its work, and why it's so important. Some of these numbers will be shared with you a little later, but we have found from our work in the clinic that 94% of our clients want people who understand the deen in order to get therapy from them. So it makes sense to have Muslim therapists who are not just Muslim, because that's great. If we stop right there, that's an amazing accomplishment for our community. But they're not just Muslims serving Muslims. They're also people who, in addition to being licensed by the standards of their state, Illinois here or California there, are also people who are being trained in the Islamic sciences and working on their own understanding of Islam, being committed to their own learning of Islam, and in addition, learning techniques of Islamic psychotherapy, which Khalil Center offers our trainees. This is amazing work, completely novel, and I hope you see that for what it is and the amount of the impact it has. Inshallah, your support tonight will go and very far. Should this continue and be a wonderful asset for our community, I can imagine Khalil Center coming up in all the different cities across the country and being a model for change everywhere. Also, I have to say that in non-Muslim communities, you find it very often that the people of faith leaders, ministers and pastors and so on, they have figured this out, that they need to have grounding and counseling in addition to their spiritual training. So it is common now to find people who are MFTs, marriage family therapists, who are pastors who are also MFTs, marriage family therapists, or pastors who are also getting their PsyDs or psychology degrees. We need this to be a commonplace practice too, that we have Muslim MFTs or psychologists or psychiatrists who are also trained in the deen, right? And I would say, in addition to all of that, that our deen as Muslims has even a richer heritage and legacy in this, as I just mentioned to you about Al-Balkhi and the Islamic hospital system. This is our legacy, this is our tradition. And with it, inshallah, we can definitely take this in hand, learn from our past, and kind of move forward, inshallah, to the present, to make sure that we bridge that gap and really have these excellent, excellent resources, inshallah. And that, sisters and brothers, is why I'm so excited about having the Khalil Center, and why I'm so happy that all of you are here to support this great cause. Inshallah, with your support and with your du'as, we're going to continue to have amazing resources for our communities, and maybe even in the very near future, we'll have that Bemeristan model in which you have the Islamic hospital system with that interdisciplinary team that I was explaining, that is funded by zakat funds and completely free of charge and covered for the community. Imagine that, inshallah ta'ala. Raise your hands and say Ameen. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa barakallahu feekum, inshallah. We look forward to a pleasant evening with all of you. Please keep us in your du'as and keep this tradition going, inshallah. And for those who are interested or piqued your interest, certainly come and see us and talk to us and be part of this great adventure, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.